Thank you very much, Sir Roger. And I should start my speech with my personal apology for not having been here for the full course of this debate. The reason in my case, well, I very much wanted to be actually, but I had duties in Westminster Hall for 2 debates during the course of the afternoon, which prevented me from taking a full role in this debate. But I'm very grateful, Sir Roger, for you nevertheless agreeing to call me in what is obviously a very important debate. I have heard sufficient, however, Sir Roger, of the debate, the back and forth, that there has been criticism from the benches opposite that this bill goes too far. And there are even some words of advice and criticism on these benches that it perhaps doesn't go far enough. So I think before we get down into the nitty-gritty of the amendments, it is worth going back to base principles, look at the fundamentals as to why this bill is necessary in the first place. Because it is, without doubt, it must be the case for every single member of this House, irrespective of their party loyalties, they must agree that the current position in relation to small boats crossing the Channel is deeply wrong and has to be addressed. It's just not fair what is happening at the moment, because the small boats programme that we see in our television screens and have done for the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, ever since we plugged the last gap in our external borders by making it harder for illegal immigrants to get onto lorries or to get on the Eurostar. That's going back almost a decade, in fact. The business model is such that where you restrict one point of illegal access, the model will seek out the next weakest point in the border of our country. And right now, that is small boats crossing the Channel. But these are not individuals buying up dinghies and setting off across the Channel. We all know that this is a massive commercial opportunity for organised criminal gangs making masses and masses of money, millions of pounds, tens of millions of pounds, from the misery of others. This is money going into organised crime, which then finds a vent in other crime, both in Europe and in our own country. And it is criminal gangs who are imposing violence on the very vulnerable people that are then exploited by them in the crossing of the Channel. So it must be right that any responsible government would take steps to challenge a set of circumstances where very vulnerable people are being exposed to risk and violence, not just the risk of death crossing the Channel. And the honourable member from Doncaster, if I heard him correctly, said there were 5 deaths just last week from this very dangerous process. But there's also the violence of the criminal gangs imposing their will on these migrants. Yes, I'll happily give way.
Thank you very much for the intervention, accepting my intervention. Does the honourable member not agree that the massive amount of money wasted on the Rwanda plan would be better spent on creating safe legal routes and clearing the backlog so that those fleeing persecution can build a better life in a country proud of its humanitarian actions, as so many have in my constituency of Ealing Southall?
I'm very grateful to the honourable member for Ealing South for his contribution. And he allows me to highlight the success that the government has made in reducing the backlog, as made clear by the Prime Minister in Prime Minister's questions early on today. But he's also right, and I don't shy away from the point that the Rwanda scheme is expensive. And if it was to be calculated as the cost spent per person flowing to Rwanda, it would be a very high cost indeed per individual. When the scheme gets up and running. I will come to the honourable member, the honourable friend in a moment. But that is not the point of Rwanda. It's not that every single person who comes across borders illegally will then be shipped to Rwanda. The idea of the Rwanda scheme is to act as an effective deterrent. So you send a few people to Rwanda. The scheme, the criminal gangs, and more importantly, the people who are paying large sums of money to the criminal gangs, get the message that this course of action, paying money to the criminal gangs, being ferried across the Channel, is no longer an effective way of getting here. And they will go, I will in a moment, but I will give way there and then to you after that. that it is not an effective means of gaining access to the United Kingdom. If that is successful, and I believe it will be when this bill is passed, then that is a very sound use of money, because it's not just preventing the additional cost to social society in this country and to the services, physical services, but it is protecting the lives of some of the most vulnerable people in the world, whilst righting a gross unfairness in the approach to our asylum system. So I'm really grateful for that intervention. I will give way again.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I think he's making an extremely important point, particularly in response to the intervention received in relation to the money and the costs involved. Clearly, he's made a powerful point in response, but is he also aware that the President of Rwanda has reported in the media today that the UK could well be refunded if all of that resource is not used because of challenges along the way?
Well, I'm very grateful again for that intervention from my own friend. I wasn't aware of that, but it adds grist to the mill and strength to the arguments of the government to proceed with the Rwanda policy, and I will give way again.
Will you give way, and can I pay tribute to him in making his speech? And he took the intervention from the other side of the House, which pointed about safe and legal routes. One of the biggest problems we have with the system is we haven't heard how many, where from, and what these safe and legal routes would look like. There are 100 million people supposedly displaced across the world. So if 1% of them even decided to come to the UK, that's 1 million people that have to be processed and found a country. If we do this as a one individual country when it's a worldwide problem, we create and facilitate not only a problem in our shores, but in the shores where you open those centres. And does he believe that there is a plan from the opposition over where these would be, how would we man these centres, how much they would cost, and what all those safe and legal routes look like, especially when people are leaving from France, when France is a safe country?
I'm very grateful for that intervention as well. The phrase safe and legal routes, it feels right, doesn't it? It feels like we should be in favour of safe and legal routes. And speaking personally, I do think they are part of a solution, a wider solution to immigration policy in the future. But the Honourable Member for Bosworth referenced that there may be up to 100 million people seeking asylum currently in the world. I think from memory, the figure from the United Nations report is actually 108 million people. I will give way there and then there, but I will come back and answer that question.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend giving way, and he's making an excellent speech. Of course, this bill is dealing with a lot of the pull factors, or at least references or infers approaching those in a more constructive and positive way. But on the push factors, and he sits on the Council of Europe delegation, I know, does he agree with me that this domestic policy should not perhaps be disaggregated from foreign policy and our overseas aid policies? So, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa or in the Sahel, let's take the Sahel as an example, where the French have recently exited or are about to exit, where the UK does have an important counter-terrorism presence, that where we have states that are fragile states becoming failed states, that they are causing more push factors. Also, there are some adversaries of this country, such as Russia, through its proxies in Africa, trying to disrupt democratically elected governments, again in order to create a crisis of migration. Quite happy to see people coming up through North Africa and coming into Europe. So does he agree with me, given his international experience, that we have to have a more holistic view of this policy in the context of global foreign policy?
I'm very grateful. I mean, those are excellent points, and it is one of the reasons why the merging of the development department with the FCO, as it then was, become the FCDO, has the potential, at least, to link those two areas of policy in a way that the honourable member describes. The challenge here is very substantial. I will come on in a minute, but I've got a few answers to give before I give way again. The challenge with push factors is that they've only just started. You're quite right. The Honourable Member is quite right to reference malign actors such as Russia in the short and medium term. But there is a much bigger factor which we need in this House to consider over the next 20 to 50 years, and that is climate change. Because the likelihood is that there will be very, very significant mass migration from sub-Saharan Africa at a time when large areas of countries, perhaps entire countries, may become functionally uninhabitable through water scarcity and heat. Then what we've seen currently in push factors will be nothing to what we see in the future. So it behoves us as a responsible government to design and implement now an immigration policy that is fit for purpose, not just for now, but the future. Returning to the point of my honourable friend Bosworth, you might have to remind me what it was. Honourable. No, not the point.
How many places, how many centres?
Actually, rather than going with that, I'm going to give way to the Honourable Member and then on. Sorry.
I'm giving way. I was just going to make the point that, would you agree? I do find it frustrating, Sir Roger, when especially the opposition benches talk about the need for safe and legal routes. As a statement of fact, there were 10 safe and legal routes into the UK in the past decade. There are currently 9 safe and legal routes into the UK, which have been responsible for 50,000 refugees coming from, of those safe and legal routes are responsible for 50,000 refugees coming to this country from 2015, and overall, the numbers of refugees or people granted asylum in this country from 2015 to 2016 is a number approaching the population of Manchester now. You're talking about something in the upper 400s, twice the size of the city of Portsmouth. So when people talk about the need for safe and legal routes, I mean, I'm just assuming that none of the benches opposite have any clue what they're talking about. Would you care to comment?
I agree certainly with that last sentiment. We've had very significant and welcomed. We've been a place of safety for I think it's about 80,000 from Ukraine. We've opened our arms to Hong Kong, British nationals of Hong Kong descent, some 250,000 from there. We've got the Syria programme, which is, from memory again, about 20,000, as well as the Afghan resettlement programme, which was about 18 to 20,000. All of these have been safe and legal routes. And the big difference, Sir Roger, is that the British government, representing the British people, decided that those were the people we wanted to help. They were the most vulnerable, and we took the decision, not criminal gangs from abroad. Final, I will give way, but then I will make some progress.
I'm very grateful, and it's exactly that the British people decided. Does he believe that it's right that the government is consulting on asking local council authorities how many asylum seekers and refugees they can support, come up with a number that Parliament will then have a decision on to vote on, which is exactly the right thing to say, to be pragmatic and practical while warm and welcoming to those who need that help?
The Honourable Member for Bosworth makes another very good point. One of the most important things that we must not forget in this place is that our asylum policy depends on the support and acceptance of our people. And if we have a policy that is rejected by people, that they feel is unfair, that doesn't represent their views, then we really run the very genuine risk of throwing the whole baby of asylum and welcoming people with vulnerabilities from around the world out with the bathwater. And this bill helps to maintain a welcoming stance to asylum seekers which are decided on by the government, whilst maintaining public support for the policy as a whole. And I'm going to give way over there, and then I will conclude.
Just to shed a little light on this to help him here, as the author of the Safe and Legal Routes Amendment in the Legal Migration Bill, he is quite right. We have very generous safe and legal route schemes already. The trouble is they are mostly limited to set groups of people, and the importance of the schemes that the government are working on is for those people who are genuine asylum seekers, genuinely fleeing persecution, war zones or whatever, can be accommodated in some way. But it will be subject to a cap. So although there are potentially hundreds of thousands and millions who may want to come here, the illegal migration bill sets a cap for safe and legal routes. So it's the the number of people that we can cope with, but they're the right people, the most vulnerable people we can take in, and then separate out them from those people who have no credible case for coming to the United Kingdom, which is why this bill is so important.
With every point that my honourable friend made, we've got real anger on the doorstep. So I'm very lucky. I represent the seat of Broughton and Fakenham in Norfolk. I was knocking on doors just before Christmas. Of the 100 or so doors I knocked on, I had 20 conversations, decent conversations with constituents of mine. This is rural Norfolk. 19 of those 20 conversations raised illegal migration as one of the key issues. That is the reality of the views of the people who I represent, and we would be mad in this House if we did not accurately reflect those views. My final intervention.
Sir Roger, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Would he join me in paying tribute to the work of the East of England Local Government Association and the East of England Strategic Migration Partnership, who've done such amazing work supporting the resettlement of British passport holders from Hong Kong, Syrians coming through the Syrian resettlement scheme, through Homes for Ukraine? And does he agree with me that it'd be much more acceptable to those constituencies referred to hear that those individuals have come to the UK through arrangements agreed with local authorities who have the capacity to support them, rather than, as I witnessed when I visited the jungle camp in Calais, done by a rate sheet of smugglers? The more you can pay, the more likely you are to be able to break into the UK through a back door.
My honourable friend is exactly right. My constituents are generous-minded, they are welcoming, but they don't like the unfairness. They feel that this is inherently unfair. So we've got young men aged 18 to 40 typically. Where are the women? Where are the children? We've got young men 18 to 40 who are relatively rich because they've been able to pay £3,000 to £5,000 to the smugglers, or worse still, will be indented and end up in slave labour trying to pay back a debt that will never be repaid. You've got, this is a terrible situation which needs to be addressed. Now, the government has taken really effective action, and we can see that, not because I just say it, but because in the hard data that we've seen this in the last year. In a time when migration into the European Union is going up by about a third, and in Mediterranean companies by fully 80% last year, the effect of the suite of interventions that the government has already made has been so effective that it has reduced migration down in this country by 36%, over a third. That's not because of Rwanda, it's in addition to Rwanda. It's because we've increased French patrols on the coast by 40%. It's because we've been tracking down boat supply in places like Romania and removing that production from the ability of these gangs to physically get people across the channel. We've increased the raids on illegal workplaces, which were part of the pull factor for the illegal migrants. And perhaps more important than anything else, we have cut a deal with Albania, demonstrating that where the year before, I think about 20,000 people came from Albania, claimed asylum, with the returns policy, recognising that Albania is a safe country, just as Rwanda is, by the way, that the number of potential migrants coming across the channel has decreased by in excess of 90%. So if we need an example of why the Rwanda policy should work, look at Albania. Look at the results that we have already achieved, and this government, for whom I commend them for the hard work, the hard yards, the incremental gains, which have shown, we're not all the way there, but 36% reductions already and counting. And if we add on what we propose in this bill for the Rwanda relocation deterrence, I think this is going to really make an enormous difference. And we've heard from government lawyers that the current process is likely to reduce the number of appeals by 99.5%. Yes, there may be the odd one who continues to appeal, but that last-minute process of repeated appeals, that will be removed. And that's why I don't feel the necessity to support the proposed amendments in this bill, and I will be supporting the government.
Michael Thomas.